Tonight, more politicians dragged into the Qantas freebies scandal engulfing the PM. Labor's Queensland pounding what the party needs to do next to regain some ground before the federal poll. And horrific crash caused by an emu. A 5-year-old boy dead, his teenage sister fighting for life. And an amazing story of survival, a woman bitten by a snake lost in the bush for nearly a fortnight.
The latest from 7 News with Jerrie Demasi.
The Qantas perks scandal engulfing the Prime Minister has tonight swept up more politicians, this time on the other side of the aisle. Jodie Lee is at Sydney Airport tonight. Jodie, Anthony Albanese's problems are now being shared with his opponents.
Well, Jerry, it is the travel behaviour of politicians on both sides of the political divide that is drawing attention for all the wrong reasons. First, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese came under fire for failing to declare free upgrades he received on 22 Qantas flights he took when he was Transport Minister in the Rudd government. Now, those allegations came to light in a new book that has just been published. It also claims that Albanese solicited these free upgrades directly by calling former Qantas CEO Alan Joyce.
Somehow the Prime Minister had a hotline to Qantas that everyday Australians don't have.
When you ring up Alan Joyce and say, "Hey Alan, I'd like an upgrade. My name's Anthony Albanese," that's the one that doesn't pass the pub test.
Sort of suggesting a Transport Minister shouldn't catch aeroplanes and instead should hitchhike up the Hume Highway. I don't think that's realistic.
But as the coalition pointed the finger, it's been revealed that it too enjoyed the pointy end of the plane. Barnaby Joyce received 8 free flights. Opposition leader Peter Dutton upgraded 14 times. Even Bridget McKenzie acknowledged that she too had accepted a better seat. There are now calls for former Qantas CEO Alan Joyce to front a parliamentary inquiry and for travel perks to be scrapped for all politicians altogether.
The cost of living has been one of the key issues blamed for Labor's loss in Queensland. Today, David Crisafulli, the state's new Liberal National Premier, was sworn in, but we're told Labor's concerned by the desertion of traditional voters. Federal Labor says it does need to do more when it comes to the cost of living.
We are coming at this cost of living challenge from every conceivable and every responsible angle. This election was never going to be, from our side, a free-for-all of public spending. It wasn't going to be before Saturday's outcome, and it's not going to be after Saturday's outcome.
It's swept out a bad Labor government, and I hope that we can do that at a federal level as well, because if we do that, we can get our country back on track.
Let's bring in here Professor John Wanner from ANU. Professor, this loss will have Labor worried not just federally but in other states and territories as well.
It will, certainly in Victoria. ACT's just had an election and New South Wales as well. Queensland's been a bit of a wipeout for Labor. It's only the 3rd win in 35 years for Labor, and both the other 2 wins were 1 terms, so they're going to be very cautious. On the other hand, federal Labor will be quite worried about what's happened, and particularly the Greens will be worried about their loss of support, because they've had 4 electoral losses in a row: the Brisbane City Council, the New South Wales councils, and now ACT, and now Queensland, all with the Greens going backwards.
We're told that Labor is working on some big campaign announcements to, hopefully regain momentum. Is that going to work?
Well, there's been a lot of discussion up here in Queensland about whether the cost of living measures actually save some of the Labor furniture, which was 50 cents. I mean, you can travel from Brisbane to the Gold Coast, Brisbane to the Sunshine Coast for 50 cents. 50 cents. And that's going to be in place for 6 months and possibly it's going to be extended. There was a $1,000 electricity vouchers off your bill that they pay to the electricity companies up here. So there's some discussion about whether those. Jim Chalmers today ruled out a lot of those sort of cost of living largesse measures, but I suspect Labor's going to try to do some circuit breaker. They find it very hard since the Voice to find a circuit breaker that would get them, on the front foot.
So what do you think it's going to take for Labor to survive and win the next election, or is it all over?
I think at this point in time, and remember, they could go to May, could go to early part of May, but a lot of people are saying now it's going to be March. I think Labor is going to probably fall into minority government. It would be very extraordinary if the coalition could put together a package of policies because I think they've only announced two. One is nuclear, and one is this local government homes spending to pay for sewerage and curbs and stuff like that. But that's the only two policies they've really announced. The rest is just being criticism of the government. But one of the problems for the federal government, as you know, is that after this year, they've got mounting deficits and debt just piling on. And so, it's hard for them to spend their way out of it.
All right, lots to consider there. Thank you for your insight this evening, Professor.
Pleasure, Jerry. Pleasure. Happy to do it.
And tomorrow, the Albanese government will try to get back on message. It'll be selling its renewable energy policy with a big announcement on the New South Wales-Victoria border. Let's go to Josh Martin in Canberra right now. Josh, Labor believes voters will choose its plan over nuclear.
Jerry, the Prime Minister will unveil $17 million funding for the country's first commercial concentrated solar thermal heat plant in Wodonga. The technology uses mirrors to concentrate sunlight to produce thermal energy. That's then stored as pressurised steam and used in manufacturing. Pet food supplier Mars Pet Care will build the 18-megawatt plant, and they say it'll cut their gas use in half. Anthony Albanese will point to the project as an example of his energy plan, which he says is cheaper than Peter Dutton's nuclear proposal, which includes reactors in 7 sites across the country. The opposition leader believes he'll be able to strong-arm premiers and convince them to go nuclear, but even his Liberal colleague, New Queensland Premier David Crisafulli, is offside at the moment.
He has ruled out having nuclear power stations in Queensland. Peter Dutton has said that he wants to have nuclear power stations in Queensland. Peter Dutton's nuclear energy scheme is, I'm afraid to say, dead on arrival.
We're going to continue to see increases in electricity prices under Labor's hapless policy. I just don't think our country can afford 3 more years of Anthony Albanese or Labor. What is Anthony Albanese's argument against nuclear? It's just political, and he's putting our economy at risk.
Peter Dutton admits nuclear does have a big upfront cost, but believes it will be a game changer in the long run, providing baseload emissions-free power for up to 80 years, longer than the 20 to 30-year lifespan of wind and solar. It's a debate that will only heat up as we approach the May federal election. Jerry?
A South Australian family is coming to grips with the devastating loss of a 5-year-old boy killed in a horror crash. Mitchell Sariovsky is in Mount Gambier for us tonight. Mitchell, the accident was caused by an emu.
Well, good evening, Jerry. The children were travelling with their parents and 2 other siblings when tragedy struck on the Riddoch Highway near Mount Gambier. Behind the wheel of the Toyota Kluger was their father, Chris. His 13-year-old daughter was also injured and will have to undergo surgery. Her brother, a 6-year-old, suffered bruising but is otherwise okay. The chaos began when a black sedan hit an emu around 2:40 yesterday afternoon. The family slammed the brakes to avoid a collision. Their 7-seater SUV was then struck by a ute from behind.
Oh, it breaks my heart at such a young age. They are very nice people. They are family orientated. The most concern is their family, first, second, third.
When children are involved, it's just really difficult to comprehend the pain that our families are going through at the moment.
That's the community that is Mount Gambier. We are a very supportive community.
The family was already going through a rough patch. Chris was made redundant not that long ago and was meant to start a new job today. The grief-stricken Mount Gambier community is rallying around the family and each other. They've set up an online fundraiser which has already raised almost $20,000.
A welfare check has turned to tragedy in Melbourne's north. Tyra Stowers is in Melbourne. Tyra, a woman's body was found inside her home.
Well, Jerry, Nikita Azzopardi's brother made the tragic discovery at around 10 this morning, 2 days after they last heard from her. The family last saw Nikita for a family birthday over the weekend and came to check on her at her Melbourne home after she stopped answering any phone calls and messages.
I went through the door and I just saw my sister murdered and just I can't get that image out of my head.
A welfare check was requested, which did result in their worst fears becoming true. The 35-year-old much-loved auntie, daughter and sister is now at the centre of a murder investigation.
You think it's not going to happen to you, your sister, your brother, whatever, but yeah, I'm not going to see my sister again.
Now, detectives rushed to the South Morang home and arrested a 33-year-old man at the scene. 7 News understands it's Nikita's partner of around 2 years, and they're still working to determine when and how she died.
We believe sometime on the weekend was the last time that they were spoken to, but exact details are still under investigation.
Now, as you can imagine, family and friends are still trying to come to terms with this tragedy that has unfolded today, and detectives are expected to remain on scene right up until midnight tonight. Jerry?
In just over a week, Americans head to the polls to select their next president. The two candidates are level pegging. A Donald Trump rally in New York under attack, labelled as racist and vulgar. The Republicans took their campaign to the heart of Democratic New York, but the speakers unleashed with a series of shocking remarks.
I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
I don't see no stinking Nazis in here. I don't see no stinking domestic terrorists in here. The only thing I see in here are a bunch of hard-working men and women that are real Americans, brother.
Under Kamala, America is a sanctuary for criminals and for illegal aliens that are in our country. No one respects her. No one trusts her. No one takes her seriously. Everyone knows she is a very low IQ individual.
For her part, the Democratic candidate was campaigning in the key battleground state of Pennsylvania. Kamala Harris working to energise young voters to take part in the election.
You who right now know fewer rights than your mothers and grandmothers understand the importance of fighting for the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body.
Who will win? Everything indicates this election will go right down to the wire. The company behind some of the nation's biggest fashion brands is tonight on the brink of collapse. Mosaic Brands owns Rivers, Katie's, Miller's and Noni B. Today the company entered voluntary administration. The future of its 700 stores across the country is unclear. If they close, thousands of workers stand to lose their jobs. Western Australia is officially the nation's best performing economy. Here's business editor Amelia Brace with the latest State of the States report.
For the first time in a decade, resource-rich Western Australia is the country's best-performing economy, thanks to strong consumer spending and population growth and low unemployment. Last year's winner, South Australia, dropped to second, despite recording the best economic growth in the nation, while the Sunshine State made a big jump from fifth to third, thanks to an increase in home lending. Queensland leapfrogging Victoria, which lags when it comes to infrastructure investment. And despite boasting the nation's largest state economy, New South Wales ranked 7th overall and on 3 key indicators, because Sydney-siders in particular are interest rate sensitive with large mortgages, meaning the state is being held back by higher borrowing costs.
NDIS providers could be fined up to $15 million if they hurt or injure a participant in their care. The new laws are aimed at protecting people using the scheme. The legislation will also allow the Commission to refer fraud to police much sooner. The federal government will seek consultation on the bill before tabling it in Parliament. John Farnham has made shock new claims about his former manager. In his upcoming memoir, The Voice Inside, he says he was secretly drugged by Daryl Samble in the early stages of his career. The Australian music legend says he clued into the behaviour when he discovered a half-dissolved pill in his coffee. Farnham's memoir will be released later this week. A Swedish adventurer is lucky to be alive tonight. Lovisa Sjöberg went missing in the New South Wales Snowy Mountains almost 2 weeks ago. After a wide search, the 40-year-old was found stumbling through bushland with a suspected snakebite. Police say it is remarkable she survived.
She was wandering days through the bush and quite unwell as a result of what she believes to be a snake bite from a copperhead snake.
It wouldn't have been a very comfortable few days if she's been stuck out there after a bite with no first aid. It's potentially life-threatening.
I'm just relieved that she's been found. It's great. She's a special person. She's got a heart of gold.
Tonight she is recovering in hospital. You're watching the latest from 7 News. Next, the terrifying moment, air raid sirens sound and missiles fire, no let-up in the Middle East. Machete madness, the frightening moment teens face off on a Melbourne doorstep, and the breakthrough blood test changing the way doctors diagnose Alzheimer's. Stay with us, those stories and more are just ahead for you here on the latest from 7 News. Still no sign of a let-up in the trouble engulfing the Middle East. Let's go straight to Ashley Mullaney tonight. Ash, still no ceasefire, no sign of anyone giving ground.
Jerry, this conflict has been relentless and we're seeing this exchange of fire on all fronts. Late Friday, we saw Israeli jets flying deep into the heart of enemy territory to strike Iran. Today, we've seen more clashes with Iran's proxy Hezbollah in Lebanon. The terror group started firing missiles at Israel just after dawn and the Iron Dome went into action to shoot them down. To get a sense of what it feels like and sounds like in these border towns, just take a listen to this. It's frightening stuff, what they're all going through. It didn't take long for Israel to respond, ordering 14 border villages in Lebanon to evacuate before striking there. Now, there's constant danger, rather, outside Israel's borders and within. Just yesterday, one person was killed and dozens were injured when a truck ploughed into a bus stop north of Tel Aviv. On the political front, there is mounting pressure on the Prime Minister to get a deal done to free those hostages in Gaza, with anger spilling over overnight. Jerry.
Ending, isn't it, Ash Mullaney? Thank you. A woman has faced court accused of assaulting Senator Lydia Thorpe. The incident happened outside the MCG after the Dreamtime game in May. 28-year-old Ebony Bell appeared via video link. She's charged with several counts of unlawful assault and recklessly causing injury. She'll be back in court next month. A former Australian soldier has been charged after a shootout with police. Officers swarmed a property in rural Victoria last Thursday. The 56-year-old's accused of shooting at detectives who then returned fire. He faces a string of charges and tonight remains in custody. Terrifying video has captured the moment a group of teenagers armed with machetes clashed on a Melbourne doorstep. The violent confrontation happened on Friday night. Police say the teens involved don't want to press charges. Australia's 3G mobile network has been switched off. Telstra and Optus ended their services today. Vodafone completed its 3G shutdown earlier this year. If your phone was manufactured before 2019, it is likely to be affected. Any medical devices, EFTPOS machines and security devices that depend on 3G could also stop working. To find out if you're affected, text the number 3 to the number 3498. It was a mostly flat start to the week for local shares. Here's James Tao from ING Bank.
Good evening. It was a fairly quiet start to the week for the local share market. We had the ASX 200 lifting just 10 points, or a little over 0.1%, as investors await some key inflation figures for the September quarter out on Wednesday. Today, though, it was really the big banks and miners working against each other. We had the miners lifting about 1 to 2% for Fortescue, Rio and also BHP, while the big four banks were down around 0.8% for CBA and ANZ. The Aussie dollar was also weaker, falling to about 65.9 US cents. If we have a look ahead at the US markets, US futures are actually pointing at a positive open to the week on Wall Street. We'll also see a big week in terms of US earnings, with a number of the large tech companies releasing their results this week. In terms of the Aussie market tomorrow, CSL will be the largest company that will be holding an AGM.
A simple blood test could soon help detect Alzheimer's disease faster than ever. A major breakthrough by Melbourne scientists found testing can now be done using standard pathology machines. It's expected to cost about $100. The study involved 388 patients. The simplified test is proving 92% accurate.
It takes about 3 years to be given a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, and that's valuable time that's lost. You can get the test at the moment if you send your blood to the United States for $1,500, but this is a major cost reduction.
The test will become available in Australia in about 2 years. Still to come, tomorrow's weather details, then an Australian masterclass on ice from a couple of world champions. Our final frames are next. You're watching the latest from 7 News. Weather around the nation tomorrow. Brisbane, the risk of a shower or storm. Mild in Sydney, 23 the top. Canberra aiming for 25 degrees. Melbourne heading for 19. Partly cloudy in Hobart. Sunshine for Adelaide and 25. Perth climbing to 32. Darwin set to reach 36 degrees. Cooktown expecting 31. 29 degrees in Gladstone. Some drizzle in Byron Bay, grey skies in Port Macquarie, fine in Birchip and 27, Mount Hotham reaching just 14 degrees, Port Augusta warm and 32, Tom Price 38 degrees. Tonight's final frame. It's been more than 40 years since British couple Jane Torval and Christopher Dean skated their way to an Olympic medal. They recorded a perfect score across the board back in 1984. Now they're about to hang up the skates. They're in Australia to promote next year's farewell tour, and today, for these lucky ice skating students, a once-in-a-lifetime masterclass. We're told their gold medal-winning bolero from the 1984 Winter Olympics will be a feature. Our final frames. That's the latest for this Monday. Thank you for your company. Our next bulletin is in sunrise from 5:30 a.m. But for now, from all the 7 News team, good night.
The 7 News app will give you the news you want. Download now.